Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you very much for joining today's Keshair book club. My name is Dora. I'm joining you from Budapest. I'm one of the organizers of Keshair, and you can also find here Sebastian, who is the other one. It's the two of us who started this project almost 6 years ago now. And thank you everyone who have been joining us for many, many events. And it's always so nice to have you back. And if you're joining us for the first time, just very briefly about us, Kesher means connection in Hebrew, and our project's mission is to learn together, teach together, connect together through Jewish history, culture, and also the present day lives of Jewish communities from all over the world. So we engage in different Zoom sessions in which we either visit a city or a country virtually, and we learn about their Jewish heritage. Or in the case of the book clubs, we invite authors who write about Jewish themes or themes that somehow connect with this overall Kesher theme, which is Jewish life around the world. Today, we are very happy to welcome Lisa F. Rosenberg, who is the author of Fine, I'm a Terrible Person. She's a writer and arts professional with degrees from UC Berkeley, the Graduate Humanities Program, and an MFA from Dominican University of California. She began her career as a gallerist with Crown Point Press and the John Berggruen, I hope I'm pronouncing
Perfect.
it
Perfect.
correctly, gallery. Later working as a public guide at SF MoMA and museum educator at the Contemporary Jewish Museum. Her writing has focused on nonfiction, mainly art-related essays, with recent fiction publications. Fine, I'm a Terrible Person is her debut novel, grounded in her Rhodeslis Ladino-speaking Sephardic heritage. So now Lisa will present to us a little bit about her book, and after that I'll have a very short interview with her just with a few questions, and after that we'll open up for Q&A to everyone. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll have time for that at the end. So Lisa, please share
Hello,
with us about this
everybody.
book.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Dora and Sebastian, for having me and inviting me to talk about my book, Fine, I'm a Terrible Person. And I always like to start my talks with a question, and we can all see each other, so we can just hold up a hand if, as a yes or a no to these questions. Who here has a mother? Who is a mother? A daughter? Has a daughter? No, I don't have a daughter. Knows a daughter? Knows a mother, right? Okay. One way or another, we all got our hands up. And that is why my story, while it's personal, though fictional, is relatable for better or for worse. And I mean that with the utmost of sensitivity, because for some of us, it was maybe for the worse, not for the best. But either way, most of us either have one or know one or are one. My novel, Fine, I'm a Terrible Person, is a work of fiction, but there are kernels of truth and seeds of reality to the story. The main characters are based, I keep saying fictionalized, but still based on human beings that I have known deeply and loved and been driven crazy by over the course of my life. My nuclear family, my origin story, was challenging, to say the least. My father, who was an abusive, pathological liar, misogynist, left us when I was very young for his girlfriend, who was 10 years younger than him and not Jewish. And I found out years later he'd been keeping her in an apartment right up the hill from where we lived for a long time. So you can imagine what our family life was like even well before he left. We were not, I know this is an international group, so I'd say we were not Ozzie and Harriet. I don't know if you know the reference, but that's like the model of the all-American family. And anyway, when he left, he took my brother, who's 1 year older than me, with him. And our family was divided, bisected permanently, kind of a bad version of a Disney movie, where each parent takes a child in the divorce. And I was left behind with my mother, who was at best ill-equipped, I like to say, to parent, and at worst, a sociopathic narcissist who was inappropriately dependent upon me. Basically, our dynamic was what's called parentification, a term I learned much later after years of therapy. But my father and brother leaving gave us a kind of us versus them scenario, a kind of you and me against the world, kiddo, which my mother deftly worked to her favor. It tightened our bond and our codependency, and we became kind of our own little island. You know, we were different. We were, contemporary term is othered. We were poor in a very wealthy community, and we were Jewish in a community that did not have a robust or particularly vibrant Jewish community. And we were, or are, Sephardic Jews. So a minority in a minority. What Jews there were around us, including my father's very large family, which he kind of took with him when he left, were Ashkenazi Jews. I didn't know any Sephardic Jews when I was growing up. And finally, we were just not cool in a very cool area. My mother's sister and mother, my grandmother and my aunt, rounded out our little pod. They lived in an apartment very close to us and basically spent every minute at our house. And they were Ladino-speaking Sephardic Jews. Another show of hands. Anybody know what Ladino is? I'll tell you if you don't. So Ladino it's also referred to as Judeo-Spanish or Judismo, is a mix of, it's a composite language, a mix of Castellano, French, Italian, Greek, Turkish, Hebrew, Aramaic, depending upon where these diasporic Jews ended up and sort of borrowed from the languages around them where they landed after the expulsion from Spain. The language follows the route of the Jewish people's migration from Spain, dating back to the mid-1500s. And it's slowly been on the path to extinction, though still spoken in some homes by older generations. And there's a very hopeful movement by some amazing contemporary scholars. I'm sure some of you have heard of them: Rachel Amato Bortnick, Hannah Pressman, Brian Kirschen, Sarah Aroeste, others, and they're doing amazing work creating community, making connections via the internet to teach and save the language. And that's very recent and very hopeful. Anyway, my mother, aunt, and grandmother spoke Ladino in the home to one another. And it was that kind of, you know, when you speak over the head of children, because you don't really want them to know what you're saying. So I spoke it when I was young at home until I got to school and realized it wasn't Spanish. But they would speak around me and over me as a way to sort of have their secrets away from the children. My grandmother immigrated to the United States at 26 years old. So she was not assimilated into American culture. And she was actually quite amazing. She spoke French, Italian, Greek, Spanish, Ladino, all beautifully. She spoke English horribly. So we didn't speak too much English together. But she would transition from one language to another just seamlessly. It was really, truly amazing, kind of like her immigration story. And she would size people up, you know, based on how they looked and dressed. I always thought that was funny because she would decide what language to speak to you based on what you looked like. And if you were fancy, she spoke French to you, whether you spoke it or not. People would look at her like if they were elegant and refined, they got French. So at the time, though, as a child, I thought it was quirky and strange, and we were immigrants, and I was embarrassed by my family. It was Marin County in Northern California in the 60s and 70s. We were the heart of the hippie, cool cultural revolution. There were bell bottoms and fringe suede everywhere, and we were not cool. And I used to have to take my grandmother to the grocery store to buy what I thought at the time was her weird food. You have to think back to the 60s. Olive oil was not on the shelf. You had to go to sort of the exotic food section in California at the grocery store for her yogurt and Kashkaval cheese. None of it really readily available on the shelf at the time. And I used to hide if I saw someone that I knew. You know, she had what I refer to as an Ellis Island fashion aesthetic. The scarf under the chin, the Red Cross shoes, the thick stockings rolled at the knees. She used to put safety pins between the buttons of her dress, which you really used to get me as a kid. Like, why don't we just buy her a dress without buttons? Because she had to have a dress. It had to have buttons. We could have gotten her one that zipped. No, she had to have the button dress. And then she had these beautiful, big, shiny, giant, she didn't try to hide them, safety pins between the buttons. And she would say, to keep out the draft, mi alma, my darling. So that was her way. She was superstitious and she was foreign and she spoke in proverbs. You know, I don't know if you saw the book or read the book, but a lot of proverbs, that was the way they spoke. They never said anything simply. There was never, turn the lights on. It was always, the angels sing when we bless our home with the light of peace, poo, 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 spitting on everything. And when my grandmother spit, she spit. It was none of this symbolic spitting now like they have nowadays. She spit because you had to keep away the evil eye. I mean, the focus of our home life was keeping away the evil eye, which as a kid who wanted to be average and normal, this all drove me crazy. But so that was my close-knit little pod of a family, my zany mother who squandered her gifts. She was talented and exquisitely beautiful, but she squandered that on, you know, cigarettes and money-making schemes and vodka. But mothers and daughters are complicated. It's a deep, inextricable bond, for better or for worse. Therapists refer to what I shared with my mother as trauma bonded. You know, we were each other's survival. And that just remains one of, you know, life's mysteries. We don't easily break up with our mothers, no matter how infuriating or sometimes dangerous or narcissistic they are. It's a relationship for children in particular that they depend upon for their survival. They say that even abused children would rather remain with their parents than be removed. So I remained very deeply attached and connected to my mother and took care of her one way or another for most of my life until very recently. But having said all of that, which I didn't mean to be sad because it's a funny book too, I thought my family was funny. Somehow, even though, you know, there was trauma, they were funny. And I kept all the stories. I am a voracious reader. I love fictional content. I love movies and books. I love stories. And I heard the stories and I held on to them. I don't know why, because at the time, even though I pushed away their weirdness, I held on to the stories. I think that was a gift. I collected them in my heart. You know, they were a funny bunch. And it's possible that my sense of humor saved me and got me, you know, where I am today. And when I say where I am today, I mean, I'm married to a very nice man. I have two wonderful sons. I'm here with all of you sharing my story. So I lucked out and everything turned out okay for me. But one day, not that long ago, in years, not that many years ago, I was talking on the phone to my mother, as I did every single day. And something she told me just got me. It stopped me. I was already in my 50s at the time. My kids were grown and in college. And for some reason, this was the tipping point. It just knocked me over. This one just stopped me. It was so crazy and horrible and outrageous and hysterical that I just got stuck on it. You know, as they say, truth is stranger than fiction. I thought this was better than any, you know, novel or Netflix movie. So I just thought it was horribly funny. So I just thought, I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let the story go. But I wasn't the writer. I wrote in my professional life, as Dora shared. You know, I wrote nonfiction. I could write essays. I did public talks. But I wasn't the writer. I mean, I could write, but I never wrote fiction. I never had dreams of being a writer. I had no delusions of grandeur. Like I'm having right now, this amazing experience telling you my story. That wasn't my dream. I wasn't a someday I'll be a writer person, but I was stuck on the story and this cast of characters. It just seemed like it was too good. My son was the writer. He was a dramatic writing major at NYU. He was very successful at a young age. He was getting shows produced since he was in high school. He was getting stuff put up off Broadway as early as his freshman year in college. And he was funny. It came easily to him, or so I thought. And I wanted him to write it. I really wanted him to write it. I thought, this is perfect. You're a great writer. This is a funny story. There's a family history and connection. And I was bugging him. You've got to write this. This is so funny. This is so good. Your grandmother's hysterical. This is perfect for you. Great episodic content. But he just wasn't interested. I just couldn't get him. I couldn't get any traction there. And I even offered to pay him. I was like, you got to write this. And he said one day after me, nudging him, he said, you write it, Mom. So the response came very spontaneously. I wasn't defensive. I said, okay, I will. And I'm one of those people, which I'm sure maybe many of you this resonates with, that when you see a movie or you read a book, you think, oh, I could do that. You see a movie and you think, I know, I could recast that movie. I know who would better play that part. Or the same with books. You think, oh, I could have done that. Though I never had. I thought I would just sit down and write a novel, which I really learned my lesson. You don't just sit down and write a novel, at least not for me. I thought I would just sit down like Hemingway and it would just flow beautifully, elegantly, hysterically, and grammatically correct right out of me, over a weekend. And that is definitely not what happened. I just realized I had no idea how to begin. But I couldn't let go. I didn't let go. For some reason, I just had this drive. So I went back to school and I got an MFA in creative writing at 60 years old. And it was a fantastic experience. It was the best thing I could have done. It gave me community, a generous, supportive, non-ageist, non-sexist community, which was a wonderful surprise. So if anybody's thinking if you've got a story in you, go for it. It's the most generous. The literary world is a very generous world. And that has been a gift. Although sitting in a critique circle at 60s, no joke. I've never been very good at getting critique, but that's okay. It's what it took. So I learned how to write creatively. I learned craft. I got accountability to produce content. And I got a pandemic with lots of time on my hands, so no excuses. So I got everything I needed, though I could have done without the pandemic part. And I set out to bring this character, this mother of Aurora, to life. And that is what drove me to the page, the obsession I had with Aurora, the mother. So it was going to be a single protagonist story, but once I began, I created the secondary character because every protagonist needs an antagonist. Leyla, her adult daughter, Leyla Feldenberg Rothstein. And the character became so rich and fun and interesting and complex and funny that it was impossible to diminish her. So it became a dual protagonist story, a mother-daughter story, not just a mother story. And I definitely had the experience that I had read about, but I couldn't believe it till it happened to me, where my characters, once I created them and realized them, they came to life and they began to interact with each other. They would decide what they were going to do. They would decide where they were going and what they were going to say. I would literally wake up in the middle of the night and I would think, you're not going to say that, are you? And they'd say, oh yeah, I'm saying that. You better get to the keyboard and start typing it because this is happening. So it was a lot of fun. It actually became fun after a while. But another gift and another component of these delicious, quirky, idiosyncratic characters is the history. I got to shine a light on my beautiful Rhodeslis heritage. So that was just a gift that happened. It wasn't the intention, but it had to happen because it's such a part of the story. And the Jews of Rhodes are a Nazi success story, what I say. One entire community. When you say community, you think a neighborhood or a village, but we all know it's an entire world, each soul, a universe. And the Nazis came to Rhodes, an island far south in the Aegean, far from Northern Europe, at the end of World War II. Hitler was on the run, the Allies were closing in, it was just about over, the writing was on the wall, and the Jews of Rhodes were far geographically from the war. And they thought they would remain untouched. And the Germans came all that way, mustered all those resources at the end of the war because there were Jews there. And they wiped out the community in one swift, efficient weekend. It is well documented as the last deportation of Jews in World War II. And that is my family legacy. And I'm here today because my grandfather and grandmother, both born in Rhodes, left before the war. So they were not part of that. And most everyone that remained was deported to Auschwitz and murdered at Auschwitz or died on the way in the transport, which was absolutely brutal. Very few survived. And after they rounded up the Jews on Rhodes, they turned the ship to the even smaller neighboring island of Kos to pick up hovering around 100 Jews that were there. So I was driven to share this small, beautiful community that I'm so proud of now, share the language of Ladino, the proverbs, and this beautiful, interesting, and threatened language, because I kind of bear some responsibility. It started to die off with me, right? My generation, who did not continue to speak it. And I wanted to share the amazing food of my heritage and all those things that I thought were weird when I was a kid, that I feel so much shame for that now, because obviously as I grew and matured and learned more, I'm so proud of my heritage and the story. And those weird, idiosyncratic, quirky, the otherness of them, knowing what they went through to become who they were and to make them that way was so rich and interesting. And I'm very proud of the story now, and I cherish it. And so that was, I hope this book, that's not how I started the endeavor, but I do hope it makes up for some of that shame about being embarrassed when I was out with my grandmother, because she was truly remarkable. Her story was remarkable. And I got to show the kind, loving, beautiful, accepting, generous community. They really are like that. You meet a cousin for the first time and they take you in as their own. I visited Rhodes myself. Every summer in Rhodes, there's a commemoration of the deportation because it happened in July. And the Rhodeslis, I don't know about other Ladino communities, but at the Rhodeslis, when you meet somebody, it always begins with, "Hija de quién sos tú?" And that means, whose child are you? And then it begins with, well, my cousin's aunt's sister's friend lived down the street from a business partner of the son of the cousin who was married to your brother, and it becomes this like, oh my God, we're related. And it just was this fabulous reunion of hundreds of total strangers crying and hugging. It was an absolutely beautiful experience. And that is truly how they are. So writing the book was just really a cascade of unanticipated blessings, exploring the mother-daughter story, shining a lens on a very real community that I grew up in. And obviously I marveled at it, though I held it at distance for a while. I marvel at them and deriving some joy from what was actually a pretty crummy childhood. And I can't tell you how many times I would sit at my desk typing and laughing out loud, and my husband would come by and hear me and he would be like, "What are you laughing at?" And so truly, this is not original, but laughter truly is the best medicine. So that is the story of Fine, I'm a Terrible Person. And I would like to now share some pictures with you of some of the people that I'm inspired, right? I keep saying fictionalized in my story. So can you all see that? Did that work okay? This is the Hannon family, the family of my grandfather. He's not in the picture because he was an older brother and he left already to seek his fortune and send money and help. This is Joya Hannon, who was my great-grandmother, and my mother is named for her. Next to her is her husband, Isaac. They both were deported to Auschwitz. The girl on the left here, Allegra, was the oldest daughter, and she tragically was killed in the Allied bombing. The Allies came to defend against the Nazis, and what they refer to now as, I guess, friendly fire. And Allegra was walking home on Shabbat and died in the Allied bombing. And then this young girl, looks like sort of an adolescent, whose hand is on her mother's shoulder, is Rika Benvenisti, who I will show you another picture of and grown. And this is my grandmother. In the book, she's Fluru, but her name was Flora of Zeradel, and there she is, and this was taken on Rhodes. And when she was very young, I can't seem to get to, there we go, the advance. And there she is as a mature woman in San Francisco, California. And you can see her name is now Flora of Zeradel Hanan. And they didn't meet in Rhodes. They met in the Rhodeslis community in Seattle. And that's where they found each other and got married and ended up in San Francisco after that. So the Rhodeslis community at that point was still forming community, growing, marrying each other. And this is a picture of the Rhodeslis community, not the entire one, obviously, of my family in Los Angeles. And down here is my grandfather, who wasn't in that picture. But over here on the left is Rika, again, Rika Benvenisti, as a grown woman, their brother and sister. And I don't know if you've read the book, but if you do, this is Esther right there, whose story of her ending inspired the entire book. I just was so happy to find this picture because there she is, the real Esther, peeking out from behind my Auntie Rika. And then right there in the very, very center is my mother with her dark skin and dark eyes and dimples. And I just love, they all were together. And there's Rika again, as a beautiful young woman. She emigrated through Cuba. And here is a plaque on the wall of Kahal Shalom Synagogue in Rhodes, which I took when I was visiting there. And you can see it's really just a handful of names. And that's why when we say Isha de Kensos too, one way or another, you will have intersected in your family history with each other. And that's why when they were sort of scattered after the deportation and the Holocaust, and they went to the various communities that they went to, it's really, if you find somebody in the world, which we do by accident, and they say their name and you recognize that name, you know that they are probably Rhodeslis, and somehow you intersect. And my family's names are there: Benvenisti, Hannon of Zeradel, and Notrika. And this is me. Okay, it was a hot day. I wasn't looking my best, but all right, it was hot. It was the summer, but I was visiting the cemetery and I was honored to put a stone on the tomb of my relatives. And there I am. And for me, this experience is important. It was like validating. These were like mystical stories and mystical people that you hear about. And then you go and you think, wow, this is all real. These people were really real. They lived this life. This is Allegra's name is on the plaque at the cemetery for those whose lives were lost in the Allied bombing. And so it was like a verification of these mystical characters that were true. And this is the tomb of Isaac and Joya, my great-grandparents in Rhodes, and it's in French. And if you were educated in Rhodes in the Judria, you went to the Alliance School, which was endowed by the Rothschild family, and they spoke French and learned in French, which is the reason that my grandmother spoke French so beautifully. And here it says, Ici repose Joya Hanan, son mari Behor, Isaac Hanan. Behor is the word before the oldest born. Mort the 16th of August in Auschwitz by the barbarous Nazis. And so here lies Joya and Isaac, her husband. And so that is my presentation. I'll stop sharing now. Thank you all for allowing me to share all of that. And I don't know if Dora has questions or anybody else has questions.
Yes, so I'll start with a few questions myself, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from everyone. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your own story with us and the story that inspired the book. I read the book and it was so nice to hear what was behind it. A lot of it kind of coincide, like it feels, even your name, I mean, like Leyla F. Rothstein.
Yep. You busted me. You figured that out, right?
Yeah. So I thought it was just so fascinating to hear kind of the backstage. My first very simple question will be, what inspired you to choose this title, and if you can share a bit about what's behind it. I mean, for those who read the book, I think it's quite obvious, but those who didn't, it will be nice to know, I think.
Well, I say, it's rooted, it kernels in truth throughout, heavily fictionalized, but kernels of truth in this mother-daughter story. And it is something my mother said to me my entire life. And it was true that I would try, I was that kid, was the why, I would try to address things with her or talk to her, and really all I ever got was fine. And the hand would go up with the long fingernails and she'd say, fine, I'm a terrible person. That's it. It was like total accountability, but no accountability. And I had a totally different name for the book, forever and ever, from the beginning, which is why I pointed out Esther with that laser pointer, because forever and ever, I mean forever, like 3 years, the book was titled, Where is Esther? And I couldn't even conceive of another title, because that was the story. That was the beginning of the story, of the mystery of where is Esther? What happened to her? And I went to a conference in New York, and they said, this is a terrible title. You're never going to get published with that title. Nobody's ever going to pick up a book. And if they do pick it up, they're going to be mystery readers, and then they're going to be mad at you because it's not a mystery. So you got to get rid of that title. And I thought, what will I ever call it? And then they just forced me to come up with something, and then this bubbled up, and it's so perfect, and so many people really love the title that it's kind of interesting, because forever it had a totally different title. And this is perfect.
Thank you. So another aspect of the book that I think is very relevant also for Keshair is the Ladino language, which is really present in your book. And now when we spoke a little bit before the talk, and you shared that you actually even had even more Ladino in the book, and this is already the reduced version. But it's still, I think, it's so nice that these actual sentences are in the book, that they really speak about the community and how they thought. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, how is your, you touched upon this a little bit, but like, how is Ladino spoken in the different generations in your lab, in your family? How much do you speak it? How much were you able to pass it on to your children? Uh, in general, like what is Ladino for you?
Well, I have no one to speak Ladino to. I have one cousin that I speak to weekly in Los Angeles. And she's still good at, she's an older cousin that I revere. So she's sort of like an authority, like a mother figure to me. And she'll throw proverbs at me. I don't have anybody to speak Ladino to presently, but it really was because we were separate in an island, and most of the Rhodeslis were in Los Angeles and we were in Northern California. That was part of what I thought was so like the different and odd and weird, because they just spoke it to each other. It could have been Pig Latin to me. I didn't realize these were all universal, not universal, but in the community, proverbs that everybody knew. And since I wrote the book, people have reached out to me and said, my grandmother did that with her safety pins, and my aunt said that to me all the time. And so that the proverbs really were part of their culture, and that is the way they speak, in the proverbs. And I don't know if that's, obviously that couldn't have always been the case, but maybe coming to the United States of America and having to speak English, that what they were reduced to was, their sayings. And perhaps that's why the proverbs survived. And as I told you earlier, I had a lot more Ladino in the book, but it got edited out in the final editorial process with my publisher. But that was a joy, because the people that know it have reached out to me, thrilled to see it. In fact, my aunt used to tell me the stories of Juha. I don't know if anybody knows about Juha. And I thought it was something she made up. I thought the stories of Juha, which are folklore, like moral stories, I thought they were made up. I thought it was something my Auntie Reggie made up. And then when I met others and started doing research for my book, and then people reached out to me, Juha is a folklore character in our community, and it is something that is shared in the generation. So I did share those with my kids. They do know Juha. And I was glad that I passed that on to them.
And what's your favorite proverb? Like something that you actually use and
Oh, I spit all over that's the other thing. I thought the thing that drove me crazy about my grandmother was, the evil eye. So I'm wearing one right now. Whenever I give a book talk, I always wear it. And poo-poo, mashallah, over everything that's good or even remotely good. And it's funny because I hated it when she did that. Now it's a compulsion. I poop, poop, poo over everything, especially my children's heads for sure.
And so, what do you think can be preserved and passed on to future generations from this legacy, from this culture?
Well, I'm so thrilled. Another part of the unanticipated outcome of this book was finding these people that are doing such amazing work, um, teaching and providing opportunities for education in Ladino. It's very hopeful. It's very positive, and it won't. I'm one of those people that I know just enough that I can enter into a workshop or a classroom and grow what I know. I don't know if it'll ever be conversational. What everything changes and evolves over time, but it is an amazing thing. And I think it's an interesting thing is to just keep at it when you're teaching or you're parenting, because like me, who just wanted to be cool and I wanted to be like all the hippies around us, and you reject, that's an old story of assimilation, wanting to fit in. But I eventually came back, like the work you do, history and sharing of stories. And there's scholarship and documentation, but there's also oral histories. It's like the little stories I collected along the way, listening to aunts or uncles or my mother or my grandmother, tell their stories. Tell your stories, tell them and tell them. They'll sink in. And like me, they'll turn back on it, maybe, when they're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and so one of the interesting things I think in the book is that, of course, you focus on the Rhodesli heritage and it comes in, but in the beginning, it's not so present in the book, and it's very American. So that was my experience, that the scenes, the contexts, the people around. I just felt like in the beginning, like the first part of the book, it was so American. And then it like kind of slowly um starts to collide the two cultures, and you chose, I felt like you chose on purpose some locations, some places that were like really in contrast with the Rhodesli family. And so I just wanted to ask you if that was on purpose. Like, did that, it creates a lot of comic effect, of course, but is that your experience? Is that like this clash of the old world and the new world a little bit?
Well, the San Francisco versus Los Angeles part of it was very real for me. As I said, we were an island. There was nobody around like us. And then I would go to Los Angeles, and my mother had all this family, and they were the sweetest, kindness, most accepting, loving, welcoming people. So it was like being on another planet. It was like a different world, a magical world. And the cooking and the baking was like that. It was you walk in the door and they would reach for the flour sack and start. And so it really felt like another planet. And so Aurora, that character, was going down to LA, and I had to figure out a way to get Leyla down to LA so they would intersect on their adventures together. So that whole thing was just fiction. That was just but it went with the theme of this woman who was this young American woman smack dab in the middle of her life in her 40s. She's got in-laws, she's got a mother, she's got children. It's called being in your sandwich years. You're in the middle of your life. And she's so constrained by the rules of this society that she's in. I needed to take her out of that and throw her into this wild, crazy world of Rhodeslis, who say everything in Proverbs and hug and kiss you, though they just met you for the first time. And then she's off to the cannabis convention. And that was one of those things where I said the characters woke up and said what they were going to do. That was definitely the muse hit me, because that was complete fiction, but it was a lot of fun to write. And it just went with that theme of that she went off on this transformative adventure and was changed completely
Yeah, it
in
really
so
feels
many
like
ways.
a journey between planets almost, this her two lives. So it was just very interesting to read. And my last question, and then we'll open up for everyone, is that you also touch on the theme a lot of Ashkenazi and Sephardic marriages. Uh, like also Leyla has an Ashkenazi husband and also an Ashkenazi father. So Just if you want to speak a little bit about that, like why you decided to put that in and
Well, in my life, it was real, not so much religiously because we were reformed on both. I mean, my mother and grandmother, I don't know what they were, if they were reformed. They observed in their home. Um, but my father's family, was reformed also, but it was very different culturally. And I don't, I can't speak to all Ashkenazi communities, but in San Francisco, California, it's very, very constrained, unemotional, formal. One of my mother's stories about my grandmother was at her wedding day, my mother's wedding day to my father in Temple in San Francisco, Temple Emmanuel, if anybody's a San Franciscan. And my grandmother turned to my mother before she walked down the aisle and she said, "Esto es cristiano?" Like, is this a church? Are they Catholic here? What is the story? Because it's that stripped down, that level of assimilation in the Reformed Ashkenazi community in San Francisco. So it's very different culture. And because my father left, I considered myself more Sephardic and was more aligned because I was left behind, with my mother and grandmother. So I don't, you know, in her world, as you've read the book, in my mother's world, she married down. Just like if you were a Rhodeslis Sephardic and you married, and I don't know the origin of this term, because I think I asked Rachel this once and she didn't know it, but a shumechu was like a bad word. I don't know what it really means literally. I never really got it translated, but it was the word they used for, the other, which was ridiculous because we were such a minority anyway. We should be able to all, we were all Jewish, but that was very much an intermarriage in her. And they wagged a finger at her after, they split up and said, "See, you see, we told you," as if that was, like that the wrong side of the track kind of a thing to marry outside of the community.
Thank you so much. So I'll try to read some questions that came in. I see that there are many questions and comments, and a lot of people who have also Sephardic family can identify with some of
Oh, I'd
the
love to hear that.
traditions and things that you shared. So I'll try to collect and read. Did your so the question is from Greg, who I believe also shared that he has a family from Yanina, I guess, um, if I'm not mistaken. Did your nonna cover all furniture in plastic?
My aunt did. Yes, my grandmother, I did not, but my Auntie Rika Benvenisti, absolutely. Everything was zipped up. The couch, I still remember the sound when you sat on it and how your thighs would stick when you stood back up. Absolutely.
Great, thanks. Is the book in paperback and or if not, when will it be?
Yes, it's in paperback, Kindle, and there is also an audio version.
And is there a discussion guide?
There are questions in the back, book club questions that I wrote in the back of the book, and I'm also always happy to participate in book discussions via Zoom, or just people reach out to me all the time through my
Great, thank
website.
you. That was actually the next question. So
Uh,
we'll share your contact details with the participants today. And
Definitely.
if someone wants to reach out for their own book club, then please feel free to reach out to Lisa directly. So let me see if there are other questions. Because there are a lot of comments, so I'm trying to see. What was your relationship like with your brother growing up? How has he reacted to your book?
Uh, Sadly, my brother and I are not in touch. As I said, he and I didn't grow up together. And then when he was 18, he joined the Marines and went off internationally and served abroad. And that's pretty much no relationship, sadly.
Thank you. Why did you choose to write your story as a fictional story rather than an autobiography?
Well, it wasn't a big decision because when I talk about that one phone call and I got stuck on that story, it felt like a fictional character. I really had a moment of, I could definitely just see her in a movie, this character. So it arrived like a character. I thought she was a caricature. And then there is a genre, it's recently now considered a new genre, but it's called autofiction. So I thought, which is like autobiographical fiction. I thought, well, my first idea was that I would write in that genre, that it would be autobiographical fiction, and I would just slightly change things. But there's so much of it that's not true. And it's because the characters essentially came from reality, but I put them in a setting. I put them into a story, which was just for fun. It really, there was nothing to protect or nothing to hide. It was like, what if there was this crazy character that was like this? And what if she had a daughter that was like this? And then I sent them on their adventures. So it just was very organic. It really naturally was that way. It wasn't like the names are changed to protect the innocent or anything like that. Although Lisa Friedman Rosenberg, Leyla Feldenberg Rothstein, that was just irresistible.
Thanks. The next question is whether you're related to Issachar Avzaradel.
There is an Isaac of Zaradel, but I don't know I don't know an Issachar of Zaradel.
Okay. Hug says
I have so many. I have a lot. I have an
from
Isaac
Congo.
Hand. Say it again.
That he was from Congo and
Yeah, a lot of the Rhodeslis ended up in Congo or very interestingly, Rhodesia, right? Rhodesia at the time, Rhodeslis were there. We had a lot of relatives there, Menashes, and Hannans that were relatives, cousins that ended up in South Africa. Yeah.
And the next question is whether you're related to Stella Hanan Cohen.
I'm not. I know
Okay.
we've intersected and we aren't related.
Okay. So yeah, I just see just to
But
share
is that's what
with
happens when they're
everyone
like
that she's an author of a cookbook.
Yes, oh, the
Uh,
most beautiful cookbook. And she was there that summer that I went to Rhodes at that particular, because it was like the 70th, so it was a bigger event. And I had followed her on social media, and I was very excited to meet her. And her work is remarkable. With her, her cookbook is gorgeous, but her work in cuisine is remarkable.
And Jake says, and I guess this is for everyone who is interested in learning or knows some Ladino already, to join the weekly Viva Ladino hybrid classes on
There
Zoom
you
and
go.
in person for those who are in Boynton Beach, Florida. So
Fantastic.
at least Jake will send
I
you a link, and I
thank
think
you. Fantastic.
those who are in similar situation may also want to join. Um, Yeah, let me just see if there are many comments and people sharing resources. Thank you so much. I'm looking for now the questions. Are you related? I guess we just were
See,
replicating
you should have
a bit
cancelled
of,
too. I told
we
you.
have to do a bit of Jewish geography here. Are you related to Rika Hanan
Yes,
in San Francisco?
she's Los Angeles, and she's Rika Hanan Benvenisti, and she is now deceased. But her daughter, Julia, also named for Joya Hanan, is the cousin I told you that I am in touch with all the time. Yes, that's my
And I
family.
think
And
the second name was Ruben, if I'm not mistaken, Ruben Hanan.
I don't know that. I don't know that family.
Okay. Um, yeah, many people can identify with the poop poop poo and other things you share. Um, yes. What did your mother tell you that moved you so much to write the book?
The story of the cemetery plot is true. My mother on that phone call said, I got a hot piece of property I'm looking to sell, and I want you to help me. And I said, what is this all about? And she said, and she told me, and see, I'm even laughing now. You're going to sell somebody's cemetery plot that they want to be buried in because Esther had passed. And I just thought that was so horrible, but also completely crazy. And that it like just like she would just come up with these things that were completely unacceptable, but like, what the heck? And so it was a bit of an adventure. She was trying to get all kinds of people to enlist them to help with this conundrum she had. So that was the original story. Where is Esther? That was the story that originated, that set me off on this journey of creating this character and putting her in the world and setting her off on her adventure. It was the cemetery plot was true.
And I'm reading in the comments just that the poop poo poo and also covering furniture in plastic apparently is not only Sephardic. That's many people are sharing that even though they're not Sephardic, their relatives also did those things or do those things. Um, Let me
Yeah,
see
my
here.
grandmother, she couldn't. One of the things she would do in the grocery store, another grocery store story, was if there was a baby, she would kiss them. She loved to kiss babies, and spit on them. If you're gonna, you got to get rid of the evil eye. And I just couldn't get her to understand that you just don't go kissing people's babies, in the grocery store and spitting on them. And she never relinquished that right. If you're a grandmother and you see a baby in the grocery store, it gets a kiss, and I mean a kiss on the cheek, and you spit on it because she said that's what they did in my village, So that was another grocery store story that didn't make it into the book that just mortified me as a kid.
Yeah, that's another culture clash, I guess.
Yeah, uh-huh.
The next question is whether anyone from your father's side tried to ever contact you, and if so, were you able to ever establish relationship with them?
Yes, they were all around me in San Francisco. And when I say around me, it was like they really like at school or Hebrew school, Sunday school, we called it. And I had cousins that I stayed in touch with in a very nice way. He had a lot of relatives. He had a lot of family around in San Francisco. So, now everybody's grown and flown and off in different directions, but I did, intersect with them gently, I would say. Never really forming tight family, but I intersected with them in a,
Mm.
wasn't too bad. Cousins, a lot of cousins.
Great, thanks. The next question is about the cemetery in Rhodes, that how come the plot says that here lies and the names when actually they were taken to Auschwitz?
I don't know. I don't know that. And the other thing is, why were they above ground? I know that the original cemetery was moved. Um, uh, I don't know how, I wondered that myself because there's the commemoration, they didn't have any of the technology, obviously, that we have now. It might just be commemorative, but I wondered about that. And there was one cemetery and it was destroyed and then it was relocated. And why are they above ground? But I perhaps it commemorates the lives of those that were lost at Auschwitz. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's a
I don't know.
wishful thinking.
I don't know. Yeah.
I
You
wish
have to
they were
ask
here.
the
Yeah.
scholars at Kahal Shalom probably know that.
Thank you. What's the next book you'll write, if you'll write any?
Well, I was encouraged by my publisher to to keep working. So I am working on something now, and it's where I'm interested, and that is, family dynamic, Jewish family dynamic stories. This one focuses again with food, around a meal. That's all I'll say for now.
Okay, we'll keep our eyes open to it. And do you have any future plans to publish in Ladino?
I don't. It was very challenging because, I mean, not insurmountable, but that part of it was challenging because I was driven that had to be a part of it. As I said to Dora earlier, there was a lot more Ladino in the story. And there's a little bit of back and forth with the editor at my publisher, and a lot of it was removed. It wasn't, I had a great editor. I had a good experience in the editorial process, but that was tough. They were afraid that people who weren't absolutely of this community, that it wouldn't have broad appeal. And then there was the way I chose to write it. I didn't know it as a written language. I knew how it was spoken. And also, part of what made my grandmother funny or quirky was she would have these crazy sayings and funny ways of saying things. So I decided to write it colloquially, the way I heard it. And there were some scholars that weren't too happy about that, about the way I did that. But it was a conscious decision to to be true to that character of Leyla, the way she heard it, the way it was. They weren't correct. They weren't grammatically correct. They were immigrants, some educated, some not. And so, for example, my grandmother, we would drive to Los Angeles, and every time she would pass San Luis Obispo, was like a milestone in the drive to Los Angeles. She would call it St. Louis to baseball. And that's just, I'm saying that like we'd say, no, Mama, it's not St. Louis to baseball, it's San Luis Obispo. And that's the way she butchered things, which was funny, but she butchered things. And so I wanted to be true to that, to being that kid in that household, to the way they spoke. And so I'm not a scholar, and I can't stand by the scholarship of Ladino, and I couldn't teach it, but I really loved. And that's when I already told Dora that it was a struggle to figure out how to translate it in the text. At one point, it was going to be a glossary in the back. At one point, it was going to be works cited, footnotes. At one point, we were going to translate it very officially within the text. And then we decided that it was better to do it this way, to just the italicize and then to let it flow. But it was a lot of wrestling with how to get that right. And so I can't stand by the scholarship of the Ladino.
But I think you solved it so amazingly inside the
Thank you.
book.
Thank you.
It's
A
really,
lot of people, you're multilingual, but people who aren't have said, I totally understand it. It's okay. I want it. The story never broke. The flow continued. And so that was our goal.
and it was really nice that we can actually read the Ladino and not just the English, because if you had only written in English what it means, it would have lost so much. But this way that you actually kept the proverbs and the words that they used, it really makes it feel that we listen to these people, like we can hear them. I think it's very nice. So
I'm thrilled to hear that because that was really the goal. That was really the goal.
so I think that was solved in a very very professional and very
Phew.
authentic way. That
Really.
was my experience, at least.
Really.
The next question is whether your husband is an Ashkenazi or Sephardic.
Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi Jew. Russian descent. His family is Russian immigrants from Fall River, Massachusetts. But my grandfather's from Budapest, my father's side. So there's Hungarian in me.
That's where we are connected. There are a lot of comments, and we're slowly at the end of our time. But I think some comments even in Ladino.
Oh,
Uh,
really? I love that.
Renee wrote, "Merci mucho por compartir la narrativa de tu familia." I hope I'm
Oh,
I'm not butchering too much.
that's beautiful.
Uh, well, very nice to read it also. So I think we'll close for today. But thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts, and we'll share the chat with also with Lisa. So
Thank you.
there are some comments, and maybe you want to follow up on something, then you'll have the chance. And also,
Thank
of
you.
course, tomorrow we'll send out a follow-up email. We'll share where you can buy the book and Lisa's contact details. So you will be able to be in touch or invite her to your book clubs if you wish. So thank you everyone for being here and for so many comments and questions and thoughts. It was really nice to read. And thank you, Lisa, for
Thank you,
sharing your story.
everybody. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, Sebastian. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it was really a joy. I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, and we encourage everyone to read the book. It's really special.
Thank you.
So we hope you will enjoy it as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day, or good night, or good morning, depending on where you are or when you are watching this. So thanks, everyone. We hope
Thank
to see you
you.
soon.
Bye.
And join us this Thursday. We'll have a very interesting talk about the Jews of Croatia. Bit more up, but also some Sephardic, some Ashkenazi history, a bit of a mixture. So you can join us this Thursday. That's our next event. So we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye, Lisa.
I love all these comments.